Kevin Costner, what did he say to you at the Oscars about casting you? Do you remember that?
He said, you were the first one cast on that movie. Remember that. A lot of people will say different things. He said, but you were the first one cast. I needed a bass.
What did that mean to you?
It meant I was seen.
How are you?
I think I'm all right.
You think you're all right?
Yeah, I think it's going to be all right.
Congratulations on the award.
Thank you.
That's nice.
Yeah. It really is. Gets me downtown Toronto again and seeing some people and checking the vibe. I haven't been around for a while. Got an opportunity to go to Whistler Film Festival this year and to give an address to the brunch where there were mentors and mentees, Indigenous filmmakers. Can you imagine that? There's a whole room full of Indigenous filmmakers there.
Yeah. Different than when you started, right?
Absolutely. And then I got to thinking about when I started and realizing that I was born only 4 years after Emily Carr passed away. And Emily Carr, if you look at her work, it's all about the dying culture and the dead Indian, and she just wanted to hurry up and get a painting of all of this dying. And because this is the last anybody was ever going to see of it. And it's like she bent the energies of what was going on at that time and created this living history of the dead. And that's what I was born into. So when I started, we were dead people. We had nothing to offer.
When you started, that's profound. Like when I started, we were dead people. Like that was the perception of us. That was the story of us. We were already gone.
Yes, because there's such massive ignorance in this society about who we were and who we are.
I read this thing about you that it said that your interest in acting was fueled by rage.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
You come to the city. I came to the city when I was 15 years old.
Edmonton, right?
Yeah, the city was Edmonton.
Yeah.
The rage was when I got to the city is the way that we were perceived and the way that we were presented and the way that we were treated. And that we were primitives and we had no intelligence and we had no relationship with God. We had no worldview that was legitimate.
Help me understand how acting became resistance to that. Like your acting was fueled by the rage against this.
I guess it was just kind of innate that I understood the power of stories because I heard stories that there's something about colonialism and genocide and this will to beat the people into a mat of acquiescence, that they change the stories in your head. And so those stories had to be changed to empower ourselves to decolonize, it's a famous word right now. But to get back to the origins of who we are. I've had a struggle. I had to fight inside of me all of that business that was put into us before we were born, while we're in gestation, being told that the Indian ways are of the devil. And unless you went to the church. And my poor grandmother, when I got married in the bush, she was sure I was sending her to hell. And she was going to hell if I didn't go to church. That's what was being put in people's heads.
So when you started acting, well, last time you were here, we talked a lot about your sort of early days acting in Canada and sort of how you got introduced to the CBC, and I remember that conversation. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit about when you moved to Hollywood in 1986. You started out acting in Canada. You moved to Los Angeles in 1986. A lot of actors got to Hollywood to find work. What do you remember? What do you most remember of your experience when you first got to Hollywood?
I wasn't, I was just traveling on the wind. It was at a point where I was I was really lost. I was in turmoil. And that rage hadn't let me go at all. And I was really disgusted with the politics that were going on here within the Native world, because I wanted to talk about creativity. I wanted to talk about the arts and water and fire. And I was knocked away from the microphone because they wanted to talk about oil and gas and uranium. And the way through to emancipation was through money. And I was just a voice they didn't want to hear.
Right.
And so I threw my thumb up, and that's how I wound up there.
Right.
And that's where I met people who didn't think that way, and they would leave me alone about it. They didn't gossip about me, and they didn't care that that's the way I thought, you know.
The story I heard, and I love the story, and I haven't heard you tell it to me, is that in L.A., you end up getting cast in Dances with Wolves. And the way you get cast in the film is really interesting to me. So you go to a Screen Actors Guild meeting, especially it was a Native American focused Screen Actors Guild meeting.
Yeah.
What happens?
I had spent the summer in Canada, and everywhere I went, people formulated a circle. And so here we are. This is my first gathering since I, put my shoes back on and decided to go to this Native American chapter of SAG. And there was a stage, and all of these chairs were lined up in a row, and it just didn't feel right. And so I said, how about if we just put these chairs in a circle? And, oh, yeah, boom, 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 boom. People just started doing that. Next thing you know, boom, we had a circle. And then we were able to talk, and it was great. But little did I know that the casting agent for Dances with Wolves was in the room. And she'd been sent out by Kevin saying, find me a woman who the audience will be secure when all the men are gone from the camp, so that there's a strong woman in place.
And she saw you move those chairs around. She saw you sort of create that moment.
Yeah.
And she says, that's her right there.
Yeah.
I heard a story that Kevin Costner, what did he say to you at the Oscars about casting you? Do you remember that?
He said, you were the first one cast on that movie. Remember that. A lot of people will say different things. He said, but you were the first one cast. I needed a bass.
What did that mean to you?
It meant I was seen, because there was a lot of magic surrounding that movie, and I knew that it was significant simply because of the things that were occurring. And the most prominent thing, it was going to be in a language, a native language. It was going to be in another language, and then I asked them, could you use a language where there are some materials so that the actors have something that they can use to learn what the language is?
It was going to be in a language that would have had no way to learn it, or no way
That's right.
Yeah, right.
And there are people who have done work,
yeah,
to write their language,
mm-hmm.
and to teach their language. And so that's how Lakota became the language that they used.
But let's talk about the impact of it. I mean, for a lot of people, Dances with Wolves was the first time. You talk about the rage that you were feeling earlier in your life. The first time they saw Indigenous peoples being represented in a way that made them human at all. What kind of things do people tell you about that film when they come up and talk to you about it? What kind of things when they talk about what it meant to them? I'm sure it happens.
There's always the yin and yang, right? So there was a lot of upset that it had to be a white woman. But the filmmakers didn't know that we had our own people that spoke English. The character that I was could have been someone who spoke English. So there was that, people from our world saying, and then I have to say, well, it's a matter of transition. Hopefully that wouldn't happen today. Hopefully there's more knowing, but it takes some things to come along to create the dialogue.
Yeah.
And then people start to learn that wasn't necessarily the way it was.
Okay, so you got a little bit of pushback.
Pushback,
and then-
but also there was a great sense of pride.
Yeah.
And there were people that told me their little boy pulled their bow and arrow out of the closet and pulled Indian stuff out of the closet and started to play with it again. And someone else who let their hair be their natural color and things like that. Subtle little things.
After they saw the movie, they embraced their own sort of indigenous.
Yeah, it helped.
Yeah.
Not to say that was the only thing, but I think movies come along when there's a lot of other elements as well that are acting on us.
So how do you navigate that then when roles start to come your way back then? Like, because when you first started acting, roles for Indigenous actors, I've heard you talk about this, were either sort of background characters. I've read an article with you where you said, I've never sat around so many fake fires in my entire life. Like I sat around fake fires, all propane fires all the time. Or like often are like stereotypical roles, like, old harmful sort of cliche roles. How did you navigate what roles you were going to take on?
I was pretty much directed. Again, my ancestors.
Okay.
There was. I was just so tired. I didn't want to do it. There's a lot of times, like Black Robe, I didn't want to do it. I just finished Dances with Wolves, and I was exhausted, and there were so many things to, it hurts. Having to negotiate some of these things that are so uncomfortable that you just can't swallow them, and you want to break from it. And Black Robe was infested with things that were undigestible. So I said no to it about 3 times.
Yeah, it was based on Black Robe, the film you're talking about. It was you said no because it was based on sort of colonial church documents, right?
It was church records, yeah. It was church records. And I talked to Brian, what was his name? The guy who wrote the book.
Yeah.
And someone told me that he was a real student of, religions. And he came to our rap party, and I asked him if he studied Indian religion, and he said no. I said, "Oh, that's too bad."
So you were saying no to a lot of, your gut was telling you to say no to a lot of sort of crummy stuff, a lot of sort of harmful stuff.
And it's just these things that kind of get tiring after a while, but you got to keep going, and so you have to find a way of making it through.
Well, let's just pause there for a second. How do you find a way of making it through? Because a lot of actors I would talk to, all they have to do is just go on set and read their lines. If they want to do the bare minimum, they can go on set and read their lines. But what you're describing is some pretty harmful stuff. Harmful stuff that reminds you about your past, reminds you of the way you were treated when you first went to Edmonton. Stuff just feels backwards, stuff that doesn't feel right. You got to look after yourself. You got to look after your mental health. You got to look after your emotions. You got to look after your spirit during all this. I've read a couple of ways that you would do it. Talk to me a little bit about how you would sort of maintain yourself on these sets when this stuff would happen.
I come from a place where, to say it lightly, our family structure had kind of been rearranged. People talk about genocide. They talk about residential schools and talk about how, all our nations and everybody has just been decimated and put in convenient places for these people who have decided to take over. So, no mother, no father. And then my grandparents, they split up when I was 10 or something like that. They build a necessary strength. Either you make it or you don't. And there were a couple of times I decided, no. I don't want it. I don't want it. There just wasn't enough sunshine, you know, and there's no flowers I could pick, you know. So, um, and then again, then some little piece of bright comes through just enough to get you by. And there are people who have advantages because they're not having to worry about so many things that block you when you walk into a room, or when you're doing a role, or when you're with this group of people, and there's really nothing you can do about it at that point other than recognize it. Once you recognize it, that helps a lot. Because then you have to love your people again, because there's so many of us that are dealing with that reality. So that's where my commitment comes from. I can't stop myself from offering. There's a script where my character sees someone with almost extinct piece of garment, let's just say, and I see them, and there's many wonderful aspects of this story, but in the story that I'm asked to tell in that moment, as soon as I see that garment, I want to be there, but I have to offer to the writers that the layer missing for me in that moment is, where did you get it from? Is this a stolen thing? Did one of my relatives get killed so that person could be wearing that? Mm-hmm. Or is this a wannabe? Is this a fashion statement? What is this? So there's that moment. It's not just, boom, that's where I come from, and so let's get together,
I understand. Like, I think I understand more than I ever have from talking to you what you were up against. What also strikes me about you is that it was a long time before you starred in anything. I think it was 50 years into your career before you got your first starring role in a film in Falls Around Her. What do you remember from reading the screenplay about that? What did you make of the screenplay?
Well, we had conversations, Darlene and I. We talked about it, and so
Darlene, I don't know.
Neponce. Yeah, she wrote it and directed it and produced it.
And I should say it's about a famous musician, Mary Birchbark, who tries to sort of escape her fame and return back to her community. Okay, so you read the.
Yeah, and we had conversations, and so I was part of the development in a sense. And this. Well, I'm always going through transition, but there was a major transition going on in my life at that point. And so it was an opportunity to really release a lot of the energy that I had running around in my body at the time, because I think one aspect of it is really, really, really tired of doing stories that did not release the woman to have the power that she actually has. And that so many of the characters that I've had to play just felt so confined.
Yeah.
And it just felt like medicine to be able to play a character that had a full life.
In my mind, it must have been meaningful for you to star in something. But really what I'm hearing is it just felt nice to be unconstrained, to be a full self and not just be constrained into this one little role that I have and I can't get outside of it.
Yeah, yeah. As far as being a star, I've been a star for a long, long time.
Yeah.
In my community, people didn't even know who I was, but somebody saw me on some little television thing, And we were so sparse. I mean, this is 1970, 71, and started making films with the Native Communication Society, and even showing up on the news when involved in with Native youth or Native women or gatherings and conferences and standing up and waving sticks at the old Trudeau, so people would see you on television and, oh, yeah, and they were excited to see our own people. Because before that, it'd only be, no fixed address and getting picked up for something.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it took all the people all the time to get to this change now that we see going on. All the people all the time. The people on the front lines, people that set them up, and people that were at home. And
you do see that change now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no turning back.
So just two questions left before we go. I got to talk to your son Cliff not that long ago.
Oh, yeah?
We had a great old chat when he came in for his for this. I mean, his name escapes me now, but he was doing remember it was the play that turned into something. It was
As You Like It.
Yeah, As You Like It. That turned the land acknowledgement, As You Like It. It was very, very funny and very cool. And
yes, very dangerous.
When he started getting interested in writing and performing, what advice did you have for him?
For me, it's just follow your heart, follow your soul. I can't tell anybody how to do it.
No, but you've been through it, and you can say you've learned a lot that you might be able to impart.
Yeah, I don't know. You'd have to ask him what I may have.
He said to me that he could see the difference in you when you had a role that the writing felt true.
Yeah.
He said you were. He could see it, and he could see it in your face. He could see it in your spirit, and he said that inspired him to want to write great things because he saw the way that you reacted, or true things because he saw the way you reacted when you had that.
Yeah, good. I'm glad that. I'm glad that he saw that. I didn't know because he was such a good actor, and I always admired the power of his spirit. And when he went into writing, it's amazing. His writing is stunning. And I'm kind of looking forward to see how that grows. It always grows.
He's something else. I don't want to talk about you in a backwards way that says that, or in a retrospective way that says, hey, you got this big award, you're done, go lie on a beach somewhere. You still have, what dreams do you still have for yourself?
Oh, gosh, when you said go lie on the beach, right away I thought about Santa Barbara and all the tar that comes out.
But not that beach.
It's incorrigible.
Not that beach.
Not that beach.
What dreams do you still have for yourself?
I have a whole new world in front of me, and I'm only sensing it. The roles that I have in front of me, they're kind of going into a world of diversity. So,
what do you mean?
I mean that it's not necessarily Native story. Because I'm there, it's a Native character, but it's not about the whole Native world necessarily. And I'm really excited about that.
Really?
Because that's something that I've been feeling for a very long time. People can start to see us in everyday life as human beings. We're actually a part of this world.
Yeah, not just Indigenous folks or Native folks in stories about, the Native experience.
That's right.
But instead just like hanging out, just being part of the story like
That's right.
like I would be, or like anyone would be.
Why can't we be a part of that? How come the only time that there's any Indians in there is because of some joke that they want to tell, or there's something that they want to talk about?
Yeah, some trauma that they want to put up there or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you this, and I can only speak from what other people have told me, because I speak to a lot of actors on the show, and I speak to a lot of Indigenous actors on this show. When they do talk about who, broke down the walls for them and allowed them to have more interesting roles and to be seen as full people, I see you as someone responsible for breaking down those walls.
Wow.
For them. Yeah.
That's great. No, oh my gosh, that's fabulous. It feels like a good work day. That's great.
Congratulations on the award.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks for coming in.
I think I'm going to listen to your show way more often now.
Oh, well, you'll listen to this one anyway.
You're good.
Get out of here.